begin our discussion on applications of statistics. And at the graduate level, we're focused really on using research, using numbers, using studies or statistical procedures to make informed decisions. And earlier in the semester, we talked about the difference between correlational types of research questions and mean difference research questions. And keeping those two ideas in your mind is important for understanding what we're about to do. The mission will be to do this part of your final project, which involves posing research questions. And the research questions are geared at establishing reliability in your assessment tools, making sure that you're calibrating your tools. And what that means is developing your understanding of how to use the tools and evidence that the tools are actually measuring what they're intended to measure consistently, which is, by definition, validity and associated reliability. So that's the focus of what we're about to talk about. Again, it's important to have a quality control plan, a mechanism for anything that is observational in nature. But you can also think about validity in the extent of your assessment plan. So you've spent a lot of time in your program thus far learning how to do lesson plans, thinking holistically about an entire unit, and the assessment component that goes along with that follows what you're doing in your lessons. So again, linked to national standards, like we've been talking about before, it's important to have a plan that matches your objectives. Once you have that plan, it's important to look at your observational assessments especially, but your whole unit overall, to make sure you're measuring what you intend to measure. Because if you have that information, you can evaluate whether or not you're doing your job well and whether or not the students are doing their job well. So it's an accountability mechanism. And it really is the foundation for everybody to take physical education teachers and what they do in life as their job seriously. You are no different than any other educator. So in fact, I think you probably are more sophisticated because of the nature of observational assessments. It's a pretty serious thing when you're trying to diagnose and give feedback and help students become better at what they do physically so they develop an enjoyment for that realm of their life and in their future. But you're also responsible to adhering to national standards. So anyway, validity is really important. So validity is basically the verification mechanism for determining if you measure or if you are measuring what you intend to measure. And it's a multi-step process that probably in the big picture gets taken for granted a lot of times. I don't believe that in reality everybody follows these steps, and I think they should. Sometimes you have prefabricated situations at a school where you can jump on what they're doing, and this isn't going to be part of your job. But I am teaching you how to have a template should you be in a situation where you don't have a model. So you can think of situations, I'm sure, in your lives where students are given grades, or students are selected for a team, athletes are selected for a team, and it's not a very systematic process, but it should be. And so this is the systematic process that would really make decisions informed with pieces of information that are relevant to teaching, learning, selecting athletes that are best suited for being on a team. So anyway, prior to assessment with students, you're going to evaluate your abilities, the administrator's abilities to use the tool. consistency and objectivity are important. So synonyms for consistency are intra-rater reliability. Synonym for objectivity is inter-rater reliability. So consistency is intra, objectivity is inter. And you also might know that as agreement. In addition to having some evidence that you do things consistently and objectively, it's also important and interesting, I hope you find, to determine whether numbers correlate with what they should correlate with. So two measures that should be related or unrelated would have associated positive correlations, and if they're unrelated, negative correlations. And if they don't correlate in that way, then you have to think about, why is that so? Is it because maybe the administrators weren't doing things correctly? Maybe it's because the test is not clear enough, the instructions are not clear enough, the criteria are not clear enough. And so you can go back and figure out where the consistency or the objectivity is failing. So the criteria for reliability, so the magnitude of the correlation we'll be looking for, is going to be 8 or greater, 0.8 or greater. Okay? And if you have a correlation of 0.8, it'll usually be statistically significant depending on the sample size, but you do want coefficients that are greater than 8. Establishing validity for observational assessments really means that you're calibrating assessments. So in order to do that, in order to start the process, you want to review your objectives, you want to review the criteria, administrative procedures, and scoring, and make sure that they make sense, that they are logical, and that if there are issues, you go back, based on the numbers, once you run the statistics, you will go back to this point, review the objectives, review the criteria, review administrative procedures and scoring to see if there was breakdown somewhere in there. There could be other issues as well, but the point is you don't want to have systematic error coming from what you do. You want to get a true performance measure of your students, and in order to do that, you have to have consistency and you have to have objectivity. You can't be biased. So what does that mean? If there's a kid in your class who's a troublemaker, you're not going to be inclined to give him a worse grade than he actually is performing with. Okay? Now, sometimes that's hard to do, but if you have a good assessment, it'll be objective in nature, and that stuff won't come in unless you choose to. Sometimes it'll be tested. But anyway, pilot testing is a process that you need to put some time into if you want to make sure you've got the numbers to support what you're doing. Whether this is going to be a reality for you in your careers as teachers is up to you, but the process to calibrate your instruments for observational assessments particularly is to have a setting where you have two administrators, peers that you, or colleagues you may be working with, family members. Doesn't really matter. You need just two bodies to watch the same thing and get observations within day. So it might be that you have videotape performance using the assessment objectives, administrative procedures, etc. So you have a small sample, maybe 5 or so, 5 to 10 people, where they engage in whatever the assessment target is, and you record their behavior and evaluate. So you want them to do the behavior twice within one day, and the reason being is if you're evaluating consistency, you have to be able to evaluate performance more than one time, because otherwise you wouldn't have consistency, of course. So the way that it would work is that you would have a videotape or a live performance of 5 people or 5 to 10 people. They would do the behavior 2 times, and you would observe them each time, so that you'll have time 1 and time 2, and your other administrator will do the exact same thing, and you will have then data to calculate inter and intra-rater reliability. Okay? essentially they're correlations.